New York's classic rock, Q1043.
Good morning to Heather O'Neill. She is an Emmy and Peabody Award member. Now, we've spoken to a lot of Emmy winners. Peabody Awards are like, they way up at the top. And her film, No Ordinary Life, recently debuted at the Tribeca Festival, which used to be known as the Tribeca Film Festival. I have no idea why they changed the name, but it is now the Tribeca Festival. And this film follows 5 female camera women who were on the front lines. You have no idea when you're watching footage from the front lines who is behind that camera. I had no idea of these 5 women's stories. But before we get to their story, I just want to touch on CNN great Christiane Amanpour, because she is interviewed quite a bit in this documentary, No Ordinary Life, because she has worked with all of these camera women, and she just became part of the news just days ago when, I, as a cancer survivor, was shocked. I'm always shocked when I hear somebody else is diagnosed with cancer, but that she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and that she had surgery and is going to have chemotherapy. So first of all, Heather, have you been in touch with Christiane?
Yeah. All of us are obviously quite concerned and, wish her everything the best. She's an incredibly strong woman. Nothing really slows her down. And I really know that she will pull through this. And I know she was heartened by all the support she's gotten across social media, and we wish her the best.
And it also resonates because one of the camera women, frontline camera women who you follow in this documentary, No Ordinary Life, passed from cancer. And you actually talked to her, what was it, weeks before she died?
The interview was actually done. Margaret Moth was obviously a camera woman that was featured in our film. And not only, did Margaret survive being shot in the face by a sniper in Sarajevo, and she went on to work for years after that. Unfortunately, she passed away over 10 years ago from cancer. And a very good friend of hers had done that interview with her just months before she passed. And, she was very courageous in her fight against cancer. Really, again, another really strong woman, very determined, and, knew that she was coming to the end of her life and had made peace with it. Margaret was an incredible woman, and we're sorry she can't see this film today.
It was, her story is just so unbelievable, and she's just such a striking person. I mean, here she was shot in the face in Sarajevo in a car with her crew. She survives that, which is devastating because it's disfiguring, and she really could have lost her life. And then she goes back in the field in Sarajevo. I mean, who has the bravery to do this?
Yeah, Margaret was remarkable. I mean, everyone who worked with her, was just struck by her determination. I mean, she was incredibly professional, incredibly committed to her job, to getting to the truth, and literally the first place she wanted to go back to once she recovered from a truly horrific injury was Sarajevo. And I think, as you see in the film, a lot of the other women that she worked with, probably questioned that. But no one stopped her and no one told her no. And she would have never accepted no as an answer. But I think it did surprise a lot of people that she wanted to go back to Sarajevo, but she did. And she went into many conflict zones after that.
Heather, what gave you the idea to do this documentary, No Ordinary Life, to begin with?
I am a, former CNN journalist, and these women were legends when I first started there many years ago. And I kind of got the good fortune to begin to meet some of them. I met Mary Rogers in Baghdad in 2006, and again was just struck by, these really incredibly tough women working these incredibly difficult jobs in incredibly difficult places. And, the seed was planted many years ago. I said, wow, this would just be such an incredible story. 5 women in one news organization, working internationally, in, in wars and conflicts and uprisings, was just remarkable. And Mary Rogers is still out there today, really kind of kicking ass.
And these women, these 5 women, are family, really, because there are so few women, or there were so few in the beginning on the front lines, that they became fast friends and really like family, because nobody understands their jobs and their lives like the 5 of them.
Yeah, they call it a sisterhood, and Christian called it a sisterhood too. And it really is to this day. We filmed with them, just a couple of years ago, and it was like they had never stopped talking. It's remarkable because in that time also, PTSD wasn't recognized, more so today, of course. But back then, I mean, literally, they really only had each other to talk things through. And you bring up a really important point that, so few people had experienced what they experienced in the world, that it was hard for them, sometimes just to talk to people who didn't do this work, because people could not understand just kind of the gravity of what they've been through and kind of the trauma of what they witness very often.
One of the things that you raise in the documentary No Ordinary Life, which recently debuted at the Tribeca Festival, is that it's awfully hard to maintain any kind of romantic life when you are off covering conflicts, something that the ordinary person wouldn't think of. I mean, think of the sacrifice. You're basically sacrificing a huge part of your life.
Yeah, and a lot of the women that we talk through in the film, who we feature in the film, had difficulty, maintaining any sort of a normal kind of personal life. And, their work was their life very often. I think in this film, though, a lot of women can relate to choices that these women eventually made. Is my job compatible with being a mother? I think two of our characters who did go on to have children really struggled with trying to kind of maintain their work, and also be a parent. And I think that's something that a lot of women can relate to, that, there are hard choices that come very often with your career choice. And, being a camera woman going in conflict zones is, wasn't compatible with being a mom. And I think, that they struggle with that. And that's something a lot of women can relate to.
Let's talk about some of their individual stories. How does somebody become a frontline camera woman? This is not something you necessarily, go to school to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it really does take a unique person, be it a man or a woman, to pick up a camera and go to any sort of a war zone. I think when these women all started 4 decades ago, CNN was a bit of a startup operation back then. And I think if you were, smart and ambitious and had a lot of drive, the door would be opened. For Jane, it took a little harder to get the door opened. And, it was a sexist industry, to a large extent. So it wasn't easy, but I think just by their sheer perseverance, and that they wanted to go out in the world and tell these stories, that, they did it. It's still rare today to see, camera women out there on the front lines. There are more now, which is great, but it was still kind of a unique thing that happened with them. It was, CNN really was a startup, and they got an amazing opportunity, but they also took it. They took it and ran with it, really.
And you have to wonder what it's like to be covering a situation in a country where women are class citizens to begin with.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if when you talk to them and you watch the film, they never saw themselves as any different than any of their male colleagues. I think when they went to countries like Saudi, where they couldn't drive or, had to have their male producer pay the bill or drive them somewhere, it was probably frustrating. And I think they would all, acknowledge that. But, they really didn't see their sex as anything that would hold them back. I think it perhaps bothered them sometimes, but I think they also, when they went out into the world, in countries like Somalia and, where often women aren't treated equally as men, I think, a lot of times other women would approach them and say, wow, you're working. I like what you're doing. They would get some really interesting, kind of support from women in countries that, don't provide equality. But, I think they were probably ticked off a few times.
I'm speaking with Heather O'Neill. She is the director. She's an Emmy and Peabody Award winner. She is the director of No Ordinary Life, which covers 5 camera women on the front line around the world. Tiananmen Square was covered by these women, the Arab Spring, Sarajevo, Iraq, Somalia. One of the things you raise in this documentary is that a female camera person maybe has a different sensitivity and a different way of covering a situation that will show something that you wouldn't ordinarily see in these situations.
Yeah, when we were going through, there are hundreds of hours of footage. I was just kind of struck by some of the more subtle scenes that they filmed. Just focusing on women sometimes. I think they were a little more tuned into what was happening with women in the world, and I think just the way they approached their subjects in general, there was a little more subtlety. We've all seen a lot of firefights and things like that, but Maria Fleet, one of the camera women, showed these like women throwing rocks at soldiers and in Somalia, and it was just sort of an interesting scene. And I'm like, would a man have filmed that? I just wondered, to myself. But it's just kind of their approach, and I think that they did sort of gravitate towards maybe more of the human side of stories, less of we call it the bang bang, and more of what other humans are going through in these very difficult situations.
Did you learn anything yourself from these women?
Oh yeah, so I mean, I'm still a producer. They're incredibly inspiring. I mean, I learned a lot from them in the sense of don't ever let anyone tell you you don't belong here. And I've been doing this job for a long time, but yeah, I mean, I did learn a lot from them. I also learned about, their compassion and their kindness, and, the fact that, they're so open and giving. They were wonderful partners in working on this film, and, just going through their footage, and, they would send me notes of encouragement here and there. And it was nice. It really was. But I learned a lot from them. They're just an incredible group of women.
Was this an easy sell for you when, as a film, if you pitched this idea, did you immediately get an enthusiastic response?
Documentaries, it's interesting. Female directors, there's a lot more female directors now. There's more interest in stories about women, but it was a little bit of a challenge to get this film funded. We eventually did get funding from the Helen Gurley Brown Foundation, and they've been a wonderful partner for us. But it was a little bit of a struggle. Pleasantly, surprised now that we are getting such a great reception. Tribeca has been an incredible partner for us on this whole film journey. And, we're really thrilled. And I hope that this film, sets an example and motivates other female directors to get stories, because, women's stories are incredibly valuable. We've often, not seen as as many. And I think that that's changing, and I think that's great.
I would love to see your film featured in middle schools and high schools, and not just for young women, but for men, young men as well. These stories need to be told. They're inspiring. And, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know about these 5 remarkable women. So thank you for that. If you missed any part of this interview, download the iHeartRadio app. It is free, and my interviews live on as podcasts called Sonstein Sessions. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning on the Jim Kerr Rock and Roll Morning Show, Q104.3.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.